Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. This is Scott. I am doing a 6-month wrap up. I have not actually been posting YouTube videos for the last 6 months, so some of the stuff I'm talking about is stuff I haven't said on here before. I read 74 books so far this year, which brings me on a pace for around 150 or so. I do not think I will get that high. For one, last month where I read 23 books is a bit of an anomaly. For another thing, I don't want to set a goal for the number of books I read because then I feel like I have to reach it, which is why last year I ended up reading, I believe, 209 books, which, let me be quite clear, is also an anomaly. The year before, I believe I read 12 books. And there were reasons for that. I am not trying to hurt myself to read the books. I'm not going to do the full breakdown, but I've seen other booktubers kind of talk about basically questions that they answer. I'm not going to answer all the questions because, quite frankly, I don't have good answers for some of these. Best book I've read so far, I will get into that. Same with the worst book. I'm going to have a list of my top 5 and worst 5 books. The biggest disappointment, honestly, it's got to be Death Comes to Marlowe. Because after reading The Marlowe Murder Club, Death Comes to Marlowe was a letdown. By itself, not a bad book, but the expectations I had for it and then reality. I have read worse books, very much so, but I think expecting a good book and not getting one is a little bit more disappointing than being unsure about a book and then reading a horrible book. Biggest surprise, honestly, the Marlowe Murder Club, I would say. But if I were to give another answer, the books of Rachel Lacey. I first Read Between the Lines, and I did not like it. So when I ended up reading 4 subsequent books of hers, I was pleasantly surprised. Some of them, like Stars Collide, I really liked. I gave that one 4.5 stars, I believe. Some of the other ones were good, pleasant, a way to pass time. After Read Between the Lines, I wasn't expecting a lot. So, or Double Pucked, honestly. I pretty much picked up that book as a joke because I was doing my romance video thing and I had already read the 5 books that I meant to read for it. I ended up reading like 14. And I was like, let me read this book. A girl gets into a relationship with 2 hockey players and they know about each other and they basically become a throuple. This is going to be awful and it'll be fun to read. It wasn't awful. It was actually a very good book. I don't remember where I ranked it in my June books that I read, but I think it was 6. If not, it was close. And that's 6 out of 23 books. I wasn't expecting anything from it, and I got a lot more than what I was expecting. Favorite new author? I don't want to keep going back to the Marlowe Murder Club, but probably Robert Thorogood. Yes, Death Comes to Marlowe wasn't particularly good, but the Marlowe Murder Club was. So for this brief period, and including the fact that I have read so many books by the same authors, I will say Robert Thorogood. Book that made you cry. I'll be quite honest. I don't tend to go currently for books that make me cry. I tend to read lighter fare. just because that's the way it is for me. And when things are dark, I prefer to read light. And not that things are dark, but it's been a rough couple of years, which is strange because it's different with like TV shows or music videos. I can't tell you how many Ren videos that I've watched, and they almost always make me cry. But as far as books go, I will probably get to a point where I'm looking at my list of books right now. I'm not seeing anyone that stands out that has made me cry. Now, I have definitely had books that have made me cry, but just nothing this last 6 months. Probably the closest thing is This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. I did not cry during it, but if there was something that wouldn't have made me cry, that probably would have been it. Book that made you happy. Honestly, Quick Service. I enjoy Woodhouse Follies, and this is probably the most folly of follies that there is. I I also like Stars Collide by Rachel Lacey. I'm a Hallmark Christmas guy. I watch all the Hallmark, Lifetime, all those movies at Christmas, and I like them as background. I like the happy ending stuff. I like darker stuff, but stuff like that's going to make me happy. And it's written well. It didn't make me think too hard, and I don't say that as an insult. And January and February and March is when I was still heavy into finishing up the P.G. Woodhouse books. So the majority of the books I read in those months were P.G. Woodhouse, and it's getting on the tail end of P.G. Woodhouse. So it's the books that I didn't leap to reading at first. It wasn't the Worcester and G's or the Blandings Castle. Not that there were bad books like Uneasy Money is very good, and well, there were some bad ones too. I also reread some books because we're doing them for the podcast. And that's why I'm not really reading too many Woodhouse books now, is because I'm just saving them for the podcast. I've read so many Woodhouse books that I feel comfortable being the experienced Woodhouse reader, and I don't feel like I need to finish up reading all of them. If we do this at the rate we're doing now, we're going to have 5 years worth of podcasts. So I have time that I can read them and reread them before they even come up on the podcast. I have read a few nonfiction books, some travel books. The Skies Belong to Us by Brendan Corner, which was a book club book, even though we're technically only supposed to do fiction in the book club, but wasn't my book. It was okay. I read the new one by Mike Birbiglia. If you have the choice of reading that or watching a special, watch a special. It's pretty much the same. It's just almost word for word the same. And Mike Birbiglia is an amazing comic. It doesn't necessarily come out as good in written form. His wife, J. Hope Stein, also contributes poetry to the book. So if you like poetry, maybe that'd be a reason why you get the book. I'm trying to avoid any books that I'm going to be talking about in the worst and best. Yeah, getting down to the tail end of Woodhouse. Eucridge, I'm not a big fan of Eucridge at all. It's like the worst traits of some of the worst characters in Woodhouse. And for some reason, Woodhouse really seemed to love what is it, Stanley Featherstone Eucridge, and I did not like him at all. And it's just one of those things where he's lazy and he's not a good friend, and he basically begs or more often steals from his friends, and he never really gets a comeuppance. Those are my favorite ones. A few times where he almost sort of kind of gets a comeuppance. I've talked before because I was on the tail end of these books when I started doing the video, but I have read many MC Beaton books. I do not suggest you read them. I got 4 of them as Christmas gifts. So obviously I was going to read those, but for some reason I thought it was a good idea for me to continue to read them, and they only got worse. And I tried to read. There was the Hamlish Macbeth series, and there was the Agatha Raisin series, and I read like 9 books in the Macbeth series. It was getting truly awful. So I was like, okay, I'll go to the Agatha Raisin. Maybe this is her version of Miss Marple, and that was not good either. So I never say never, but I'm pretty much off of MC Beaton books. May was a good month. I read Kiss Her Once for Me, which was at the time my highest rated books, and the Marlowe Murder Club. I read The Glass Ocean, which was okay. It was written by 3 authors, and I think they each basically picked a character time frame to write with varying degrees of success. I appreciated the modern version better than the 1915 versions. 15 Words for Rain. I forgot I had read that, and it was just. I'm trying to decide whether or not I dislike books that are written well, but I don't like the plot, or if I just dislike books that are written poorly but have a decent plot. Quite honestly, I'd say this as somebody with an English degree. I think I can take poorly written good plot better than well written poor plot. This is what I got to deal with. And then June, I just recently talked about my June in my last thing. So I'm going to finish this up with my top 5 and bottom 5 books of the year, half year. I would love if I were to do this again in December or January for the entire year, that none of these 5 books are in my top 10, which means I've read some amazing books. I don't think that's going to be the case. I hope that the bottom 5 books stay the bottom 5, because I don't know how it could get worse, although I know it can. I know it can. It can. These books I will remember, both good and bad. There are plenty of books in the middle where they were entertaining for the moment. If you come to me in 6 months, will I remember them? Probably not. If I rate something 4 stars or above, yeah, I will remember it. But the 3 and 3.5 stars, maybe not. 2 stars and below, yeah, I'm probably going to remember those. Not with fond memories, though. The 5th worst book of the year is Suburban Dicks by, and I'll mispronounce the name, and I apologize, even though your book sucks, sir. Fabian Nicieza. It's kind of a thriller mystery, but there's no mystery to it. There's almost no action to it. It's misogynistic, fairly racist, almost no likable characters, no characters I can empathize with or sympathize or anything. I was very upset because this was a book club book, and I had to go into book club and say this book sucked, which I didn't want to say because the person who picked an excellent book last time, but this time just a big swing and a miss. Number 5 best book is Beach Read by Emily Henry. It is a romance. Two authors basically challenge each other to write the other's genre. She's a romance writer, he's a literary writer. They went to college together. They now live next to each other because she just inherited a house from her father, who has died, who she found out at the funeral cheated on her mother. The woman he cheated on lives in a town that she moved to. It's just written very well. At one point, I probably would have had Book Lovers by Emily Henry here, or maybe not number 5, but definitely I had a Beach Read. It's one of those things, upon reflection, I just think Beach Read is the better written book. There are parts of Book Lovers that I enjoyed more than Beach Read, but Book Lovers also had more flaws than Beach Read. So it's number 5. The number 4 worst book of the last 6 months is Death of a Glutton by MC Beaton. Honestly, I could have put 3 or 4 books by MC Beaton in the bottom 5, but this was absolutely the worst. It doesn't even matter to me that it's fat phobic, but it was caricature. It was ridiculous. I mean, even the biggest gluttons do not eat like this woman ate. And there's, again, no likable characters in here. Not even the police, who in the first book, he was like the only character I liked, and he became more and more unlikable as the series went on. And I read books after this one. I'm a glutton for punishment because, well, the books that followed after this were better than this book. They were still very bad. Number 4 book is Uneasy Money by P.G. Wodehouse. It is one of his books that's set in America, about a man who inherits money from somebody that he helped at golf. And he feels bad about that because the man did not give money to his own relatives. So he tries to talk. I believe it's the niece of this man. He has a niece and a nephew. She doesn't know who he is at first, and he ends up falling in love with her. It's just, it's a very good book. I think Wodehouse is best when he writes a main character that isn't quite a stock character. The stock character being the lovable idiot, or the self-assured, can't do anything wrong, stand-up guy. In those two, or more often than not, the two main male characters that we will find with Wodehouse. It's not quite the case here. I like Jeeves and Wooster and Blandings Castle books more than standalone, but honestly, there are problems with those books that, although I've only read, I believe, 2 Jeeves and Wooster and no Blandings Castle books here, I don't know that those would necessarily rate higher than this one because of the issues with the characters. The number 3 book is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I have talked this book to death in several videos. If you, as a woman or a man, find anybody who wants to have a relationship with you that is anything like Joshua Templeman, run away. I don't know what else to say other than that. The fact that Sally Thorne believes that this is apparently a healthy relationship is alarming. It's not a good book. I've talked too much about this book. Way too much. Number 3, best book, The Marlowe Murder Club, which I have already talked about. Miss Marple-like character has a darker past than we think. Everything about the characters, the 3 women in the Marlowe Murder Club and the police sergeant, it is great. The murder itself, I think, is easily solvable, but it's still a great journey to get there because of the characters. And I think that's one of the reasons that this is a better book than Death Comes to Marlowe, because the characters don't stand out as much in the sequel. And the number 2 book is a book, and by number 2 book, I mean number 2 worst book. This is a book that I gave 1 star. There is a worse book than it. It is Something Fabulous by Alexis Hall. The worst fiction book I have read so far this year. It was absolute garbage. It's supposedly a romance novel. It's just full of hate. It made me feel bad for a character that if it was in any other book, that I would probably be rolling my eyes and enjoying him being the butt of the joke. But the people around him are just horrible people. He is tied to a chair and not allowed to eat. He is locked in a cellar. He is shot by the woman that he's sort of engaged to, and he's the bad guy in that scenario, according to the other people. There's nothing in the book that indicates he's the bad guy, but that is it. Again, this is a book I've talked about a lot already. I'm tired of it. I hope that I do not have to talk about this book until the end of the year again. The number 2 best book is Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane. Alison Cochrane has written 2 books. The Charm Offensive is the other one. When she writes romance, it's also about more than just romance. Mental health. It's set at Christmas time. Alison Cochrane has a way of writing hokey stuff in such a charming way. This is, and I've used this phrase many times already, but like a Hallmark Christmas movie. I wish Hallmark won't do it because it's 2 women, but maybe Lifetime would film this. It's not going to happen, but it really should. It's just an excellent book. I've only read the 2 books by Alison Cochrane, but both of them have been amazing. And whenever she writes another one, I'll be reading that too. The worst book of the half year is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson. Nonfiction book, a self-help book. If you're going to this book for help, you're screwed. I don't know what to say. All personal opinion here. If this book helped you, good for you. Great for you. Awesome. It's pure drivel. It was not researched. It doesn't say anything of note. There's like 5 pages of good information in here. And by good, I mean information that I could write down, you could write down, this dog could write down, provide to anybody. But the book's like over 200 pages long. There's 5 pages of useful information in here. And it's just him humble bragging about how much sex he had and Oh, he turned his life around at 29. Oh, I mean at 19. Oh, this. It's an awful book. I gave it half a star. If I hadn't read this first, I didn't think that there would be any way that there was a worse book than Something Fabulous, but this is it. I hope it is the worst book I read this year. I'm truly frightened if that turns out to not be the case. The best book of the year, I just finished it. It is Quick Service by P.G. Wodehouse. As I mentioned before with Uneasy Money, it's got this self-assured character, but then he kind of swerves us, and one, he apologizes. The self-assured characters almost never apologize in Wodehouse. Um, Although he's technically the main character, I would say he doesn't take as big a role as some of the other main characters in previous books have. It's really an ensemble piece, and every character works. This is one of the books I think you can read and you go, oh, I don't like that character, but it doesn't matter because that character works. I don't mind unlikable characters, but I have to understand them. There are characters in here that I don't like. I still empathize with them. I still see their point of view, even though I'm kind of like, well, that seems silly. But it's just the best book that I've read so far this year. I'm hoping that there is a better book, if only for the reason that I have read this book before. So I would like the best book I read in 2023 to not be a book that I have read before. It gets number one on a technicality, I guess, but it is also the first time I have read it. I listened to it on audiobook, so technically this is the first time I read it. I'm just, yeah, that's why. I have for the most part enjoyed the books I've read this year. Like I said, there are the ones like the bottom five there. There's a few more MC Beaton books. Like the books that I have that are under 2.5 stars. I read what 74 books, maybe 10, which isn't great, but it's not horrible. And there's a PG Wodehouse book under there. And when I say 2.5, I mean 2.5 and under. There is a PG Wodehouse book that's 2.5. It is a nonfiction book. So I think 10 books out of 74 isn't awful. I just have a lot of books that are like, yeah, that was a good read. Moving on. So that is my half year in books. I'm looking forward to the next 6 months. Don't know what I'm looking forward to because, as I said, I don't plan what I read. Planning things for me doesn't work out because if I make a plan, I got to stick to the plan. And sometimes you can't do that. This is why I always am the one to give my daughter consequence books whenever she doesn't complete her TBR because she makes a plan and she's not able to stick to it because it's an ambitious plan, I think. Like her plan this month was, I think, 12 books. She's averaging like 7 books a month. Why would you plan 12 books? So I would rather say, oh, I'm going to read 5 romance books and end up reading 23 books over a month than go, I'm going to read 10 books and get 9, and that's going to bother me. I look forward to the future, although I don't know what the future is. Thank you for watching. If you have a book you think I should read, let me know. I won't say I'll do it, but I'll look it up, and if it looks interesting, I might. So I will talk to you next time.